Welcome to Look Ahead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world this afternoon. This program, of course, has been pre-recorded to accommodate the beauty sleep that our foreign editor, Tom Arms, I think is sadly in need of. And I say that tongue firmly planted in cheek. Well, not true. He does need some beauty sleep. But this, to remind you, this portion of the program has been pre-recorded since it is midnight his time as this program begins here on the talk station. And of course, Tom joins us from London, England. And Tom, good afternoon, or actually good evening to you at this time. Thank you for joining us, and tell us a little something. What's the weather like there in London?
Well, first of all, remind me to buy you a mirror for Christmas. You know,
Thank you very much.
About need for beauty sleep. The weather here, it's chilly, not cold, but chilly, but sunny. We haven't had much rain in ages, and which is always a concern because we rely on rainfall for our drinking water.
Very, very true. Many of us think of England as being very, very damp. And of course, because of the very rich flora that just populates the British Isles. But that's because of really the climate, the ocean breezes then, is it not? I mean, you are prone to a lot of atmospheric weather rather than groundwater.
Well, you know, the clouds pass over. We're the first landfall for the clouds. You know, they come over the cold water and hit the warm land mass, and the first thing they do is get rid of the water they have. Right.
And that's something we really don't think about. Well, let's move to another issue of temperature and climate, and that has to do with politics. Saw with a great deal of interest that Prime Minister Theresa May has announced a call for an election. This is part of the parliamentary procedure there, and it was a little bit of a surprise to many. I think even to you, I would be surprised to hear otherwise. But
I'm never surprised by anything.
More power to you. Well, what was the purpose of calling an election? This is a parliamentary procedure that is unique to, the parliamentary process. We don't have that here in the U.S.
Well, Theresa May says it's to strengthen her hand in negotiations with the European Commission over Brexit. That is her stated aim behind it. A lot of people think there are other reasons. For instance, Nigel Farage thinks that she's trying to avoid 30 possible by-elections because the Crown Prosecution Service was about to declare 30 elections as null and void, in which the Conservatives had won all the seats, because it was thought they were guilty of electoral fraud. And as Mrs. May has only a 12-seat majority, this could have created problems for her. We don't know for certain. I think probably it's a mixture of all those. She says that, she's being sabotaged by the opposition, who are not giving her the support she thinks she needs to handle negotiations with the European Commission. And the opposition says, well, that's our job,
yes,
not to support you.
Right. The other question, though, is the process of calling an election. Is this normal? How often can you call for an election in the parliamentary process?
As often as you like. Wow. And it's not restricted to Britain. This is what's called the Westminster model. And so if a government feels that it needs to increase its majority for any particular reason, or if there's an issue which they want to go to the country over, it can take the form of a sort of referendum. They will dissolve Parliament and have a fresh election.
All right. Now, with that said, is this a matter of an election for all of Parliament or just for the seat as Prime Minister?
No, all of Parliament, all of the House of Commons.
So, in other words, basically all of the elected officials have just been notified that they're going to have to run for office, whether they're prepared to do so or not.
That's right. And the last election was in May 2015, so just 2 years ago.
That's interesting. Okay, and when is this election called for?
8th of June.
Boy, there's not a lot of time. The other question is this:
7 weeks.
Is this?
It's called a snap general election.
Is this standard? Has this happened in the past?
Oh yes, happens all the time. And at the moment, the Conservatives are way ahead in the opinion polls. Labour is way behind. They're in complete disarray, and that's the main opposition party.
Mm-hmm.
The Lib Dems are starting to gain in popularity, but it's probably too early for them to make a huge impact, although the jury's still out on that. And as for UKIP, well, their raison d'etre was Brexit, and Mrs. May has out-Brexited them.
Okay, now
she's as tough, if not tougher, than they are.
Okay, so this is really kind of an opportunity then. I'm parsing your comments, and this is an opportunity then for the Prime Minister to consolidate more control or shall we say support in the Parliament for the years ahead. Is she the only one who has the privilege of calling for an election?
Yes. Let me just explain. Her power is derived from the size of her majority in the House of Commons.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, she has only a 12-seat majority. That's a bit thin. So, and if there are by-elections, which there are all the time, since Brexit, there have been 3. And it's quite possible that during the course of the negotiations over withdrawal from the EU over the next 2 years, that there could well be, 20 by-elections, and she could, in the middle of those negotiations, lose her majority.
So she's trying to right now consolidate her majority so that she can go ahead and proceed with the issue of Brexit. Is Brexit the primary reason, do you believe, that she's doing this?
There are three reasons for this election.
Okay.
And they are Brexit, Brexit, and Brexit.
Interesting. All right. Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com. By the way, just to remind you, tomorrow's news today by going to LookAheadNews.com, and it's free to sign up for that. And, of course, Look Ahead Radio as well. Tom, let's move on to another election item, but probably going to take us over to the next after the next break. And that has to do with France. There's a lot of movement there. And I read earlier this week that there's now a very confused electoral system there. I shouldn't say electoral system, but confused electorate. You've got very aggressive candidates. Tell us what's happening there.
Well, roughly, the opinion polls are that roughly 30% of the electorate have still not made up their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, it's still anyone's election. But remember, this is a 2-round election. For the last few weeks, it is more or less unchanged. Marine Le Pen has 25%, and Emmanuel Macron has 25%. Francois Fillon has about 17%, and there's a far-left candidate called Mélenchon who is rising fast, and he really is far left. He's been described by Emmanuel Macron as a person who wants to create a France that is like Cuba without the sunshine. Or Venezuela without the oil.
Very far left. All right. When is the election in France?
It's the first round is this Sunday, and the second round is 2 weeks from then. Okay,
so it is just around the corner. Things are getting very heated there in France, I would assume. Are the folks in the United Kingdom paying close attention to France, because Brexit is part of that debate as well, is it not?
They are and they aren't. I mean, they have a lot of their own issues at the moment, and the British have never been particularly interested in what's happening in the rest of Europe. Even when they were members of the EU, well, they're still technically members of the EU. They never really reported Brussels in the newspapers, which is one of the reasons I think that they voted to leave. But it still doesn't stop it from being an interesting election. I think the most interesting thing this week is that Marine Le Pen has called for a complete stop on all legal, not illegal, but all legal immigration.
This is all part of that European Union debate over the issue of asylum and immigration. So the frustration is still there. And yet she has what percentage of the voters at this point? And of course, this is
25%. But, wow. I think, I've said this before. She started with 25%.
Right.
And she still has 25%. And, she's completely flatlined throughout the entire campaign. She's never been able to move beyond that.
All right, as we
and the people who are supporting her, 85% of them say that they will, no matter what, vote for her in the second round. Whereas the other main candidate, Emmanuel Macron, it's only about 70% say they will vote for him in the second round.
So as it stands right now, it is a four-way race in France, and the decision...
No. Well, there are 11 candidates, but you're right. It's more or less a four-way race.
All right, we're going to get back to that in just a moment here on Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms here on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 24th of April. Look Ahead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. Europe is gripped by election fever next week. In the early hours of Monday morning, we will know which two candidates face each other in the French presidential election runoff. The two favourites are National Front leader Marine Le Pen and centrist Emmanuel Macron. Meanwhile, the British start their first full week of campaigning for a snap general election on June the 8th. Conservative Premier Mrs May called the election to strengthen her hand in Brexit negotiations. She is 10-1 favourite to win. The EU negotiating position on Brexit will be discussed at 3 separate Brussels meetings next week. The officials meeting on Monday, the European Affairs Ministers on Tuesday, and the Heads of Government meeting on Saturday. In other EU news, Federica Mogherini, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs, is off to Moscow on Monday for talks with her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov. Ms. Mogherini will be the first European leader to visit Moscow since the Syrian chemical weapons attack and the follow-up bombing by the Trump administration. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is also expected in Moscow next week for talks with President Putin on Thursday and Friday. There are high hopes that Putin and Abe will reach an agreement on the disputed Kuril Island, which Russia has occupied since the end of World War II. Vice President Mike Pence is in Hawaii on Monday and Tuesday. The North Koreans, meanwhile, celebrate Military Foundation Day. Some observers say it could be marked with another missile test. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson will be drumming up support for more sanctions against North Korea when he chairs a ministerial meeting of the UN Security Council on Friday. President Trump reaches day 100 in office on Saturday. American environmentalists will mark the occasion with a march through Washington opposing Trump's environmental policies. Trump will be conspicuous by his absence at the White House Correspondents' Annual Dinner on Saturday. Trump has tweeted that the journalists are the enemies of the people. The first daughter, Ivanka, will be conspicuous by her presence at a meeting in Berlin of the most powerful women from the G20 countries. The meeting is on Monday through Wednesday. In the Middle East, an IMF delegation arrives in Egypt on Friday to review the government's economic reforms. On the same day, Pope Francis arrives following an Islamic terrorist attack on Coptic churches, which left 44 dead. And that was next week's news today so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned for Viewpoints Around the World with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com and, of course, Look Ahead Radio. Just to remind you, this portion of the program has been pre-recorded to accommodate the late hour that this airs live. It would be midnight his time, so we want to give him opportunity to get some rest. Needed, I'm confident. But continuing on, Tom, with the conversation about France, and then we'll move on to a few other items. The issue of the European Union is still a heated topic. We've talked about this in relationship to other countries. Of course, we talked at the opening of the program. Prime Minister Theresa May is seeking an election, a parliamentary election, obviously to consolidate and strengthen her interest and support in Parliament. We've got the issue of France right now. I'm wondering, are members of the European Union, the leadership of the European Union, getting a little nervous?
No, I don't think so, because Marine Le Pen, as I hope I've made clear, has almost no chance of winning. Now, she has made it absolutely clear that if she does win, she wants to take France out of the EU. Mm-hmm. The other person who is likely to win, Emmanuel Macron, much more likely to win, has said that he wants to restore France to its leadership position in the EU. And so it's completely opposite positions.
All right, we're coming up to a very monumental moment here. We are just shy of a year from the historical close of World War I. And I'm wondering, is that played any role in the conversation related to the European Union? And I'm going back to the League of Nations and things of this nature. But I'm just wondering, has there been any comparative analysis, if you will? Because if there's anything that really defines I would argue Europe, particularly from that of the West over here in the States, is the experiences of the two world wars. And of course, the first one being the Great War, World War I. I'm just wondering, has that played any role in the conversation and concerns associated with the future of the European Union?
Yes, absolutely. But, both sides of the argument use it.
Okay.
The EU was formed out of the ashes of World War II. And one of its main reasons was to create an interdependence, an economic interdependence, so that it would become unthinkable for the countries in Europe to go to war against each other. Now, a lot of people still argue that and say that is a very good reason for the European Union to continue. But on the other hand, a lot of people say, oh, that's ridiculous. We haven't had war in over 70 years. War in Europe is a thing of the past. It will never rear its ugly head again. We can return to the nation state. And so that, both sides use the argument, one dismissing it and one saying we can never be too safe.
Well, and then, of course, you get into the issue of the creation of NATO and then the concerns associated with Russia and the European community as well. All right, Tom, let's move on to other items. Let's stay in that sphere for a few more minutes and talk about two other items. One related to the disclosure here recently of Prince Harry, the note related to the death of Princess Diana, and the disclosures that have occurred. How interested has the public been on this? We've seen it here in the States, but I'm just curious there in the United Kingdom, and I'm curious about the reaction there in the rest of Europe.
They're very interested. And the reason is because there is a lot of emphasis these days on mental health. The government has taken that up as a cause to pursue. In this country, I don't know about the rest of Europe, but basically they're saying not enough attention has been paid in the past to the issue of mental health. And so when someone like Prince Harry and his brother as well, Prince William, come forward and say that they have suffered from depression, they have come close to a nervous breakdown because of the problems related to their mother's death, early death, it sort of strikes a chord with other people who have problems. The royal family, they're supposed to be the ones with the stiffest of stiff upper lips. They're just like us. And they're prepared to unburden themselves. Perhaps we should think about doing the same.
Interesting. And did this get a great deal of play on the press there in the United Kingdom?
Yes. Yes,
oh, really?
Huge stories. The tabloid press in particular, it's front page news, for 2 or 3 days. And it's played up quite a bit.
Now, what about the rest of Europe? They likewise, of course, royalty is something of unique nature to the United Kingdom and Europe. Again, has this generated a lot of interest in Europe as well? France,
yes,
and Germany.
It certainly generated interest. The French are keen followers of the British royal family.
Really?
It's sort of ironic that they killed theirs off, and yet they are really keen on the British royal family.
That's. I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct. The French Revolution, and of course that concerned a lot of folks there in the United Kingdom as well.
And in Germany, of course, the British royal family has very strong German roots.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, Queen Victoria, we won't get into the family tree there, but there's extensive. All right. We're going to take a quick break here, and we're going to get back to other items. We want to talk about the other events around the world. We're going to be chatting about, Europe's approach to President Trump's response to the election in Turkey. That's coming up in just a moment here on Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms. Also, of course, with his regular programs, LookAheadRadio.com. That's his news site, LookAheadRadio.com, and his radio program, Look Ahead News.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment. We now return to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com and Look Ahead Radio. And we're chatting with him about the events of the past week in the United Kingdom and Europe and around the world. We're going to get more details. Tom, interesting story. Speaking of elections, we were chatting about that both with France and the United Kingdom, and of course Theresa May's announcement for a called election. The question now goes to Turkey, and we've been following this with a great deal of interest. The President Erdogan has had an election and apparently successfully claimed more power. First quick question before I get to the reaction of President Trump's call to him. What is the concern there in the United Kingdom and the European Union? Because Turkey wants to be a member of the European Union. Will this strengthen or damage that opportunity?
Almost destroy it.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. And of course, one of the fascinating aspects of the Turkish election was that all the expats, Turkish expats living in other countries, were given the opportunity to vote. What was the turnout among those who were, I call them expats, that were living outside of the country? Do we have any numbers?
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to that.
But was it?
I haven't seen any reports on that yet.
Okay, it'd be interesting to hear.
I think it might be too early to tell. They probably haven't broken it down yet.
Well, it is interesting because the president took on Germany and other countries and accused them of trying to stifle the vote or in some way influence the vote. Did somebody mention
them of being fascist?
Yeah. Did somebody mention Russia? But anyhow, the question now goes to the impact of well, tell me about European leaders. Have they spoken with the president on this, and what has been his?
No.
Really?
No, other than to express caution at the result. I mean, it wasn't fair. I mean, you can't lock up all the judiciary, most of the academics, close down 150 newspapers, lock up a lot of the journalists, control the advertising so that the opposition isn't allowed to advertise, and then say, this is a free and fair result. And on top of that, they've got videos showing the pro-Erdogan people stamping voting papers.
Okay. So they were all right.
Which, of course, Erdogan says is fake news.
Understood. Let's talk about then the reaction to President Trump's call. Apparently, he did call and congratulate the Turkish president. What's been the reaction to that?
The Europeans are very angry, very cross. He's congratulating him for a result which is clear, patently unfree. You know, it's a patent fallacy. So, you know, it's like congratulating someone for undermining the democratic process. And the Europeans are the ones who are going to be most affected by this. Mm-hmm. There has been talk now about Erdogan showing his displeasure about lack of support from Europe over the result by releasing the immigrants or the refugees held in the camp. That's 2.5 million. And so they're going to be the ones most affected by it. Wow. And they feel that Trump has basically, if not stabbed them in the back, he certainly hasn't helped them.
Well, he hasn't helped them. I don't know that what difference this would make for all intents and purposes. And quite frankly,
Erdogan feels he has American support.
Well,
and that emboldens him.
But wait a second. The U.S. has large military facilities there in Turkey, and of course, the U.S. has relied on Turkey in its in the Syrian conflict, and also trying to create a wedge, if you will, between Turkey and Russia. Turkey has become, used the term, a wild card in this poker hand that's being played right now. And isn't that something that the Europeans are paying attention to as well?
Yes, and they will pay attention to it, and they do pay attention to it. But I think it's a matter of degrees. I mean, to be in there within hours, saying, well done, congratulations, and everything else, without, and here's what really annoys them, without any qualification, without anything along the lines of course, you have to be certain to respect human rights, or anything like that. It totally unqualified in every respect congratulatory message.
Okay.
It's not unusual, and they would have expected the U.S. administration to say congratulations, but you have to remember now that you only got 51% of the vote. There's 49% of the people who voted against you, and you have to respect their views as well.
Okay,
that's a perfectly reasonable thing to say, which Erdogan is saying he won't.
Right. And well, the other aspect of this, and very frankly, I would argue that many in the U.S. have a very little understanding of the circumstances in Turkey. Again, Tom Arms with us from LookAheadNews.com and LookAhead Radio. Tom, let's move on to another item, again, associated with President Trump in this case, but I'm curious about the relationships and the focus of Europe, and that has to do with North Korea. A lot of saber rattling still continues. What's the feeling? And is there a sense that it's just that saber rattling, or is there a sense that this might generate into something of armed conflict?
Well, they're very worried. It's very interesting. The BBC has been getting scoop after scoop on this. They were invited to the military parade in North Korea. They have had interviews with senior North Korean officials and interviews with South Korean officials. They've really been reporting this very fully. And they had one interview with a North Korean official who said, we're going to be testing these missiles every week. Now, one of the newspapers here, and one which I really usually don't pay much attention to, and I probably shouldn't in this case either, which is The Sun, claimed that the recent missile test, which failed because of a cyber attack by the United States. Right. I don't know if you've heard that.
Oh, yes.
Over there.
As a matter of fact, it's been reported by mainstream media here in the States as well. And the concern that there is, a feeling that North Korea is now reacting to that and looking now for spies and cybersecurity. And there's some concerns associated with it. Whether or not it has any truth to it is obviously a matter of speculation, and it's just a matter of, well, it's a meme, if you will, here in the country. But it's drawing some attention. And, of course, 88%, I was reading the story earlier today, 88% of North Korea's missile shots have failed, which is an unusually high number of failures. But then again, their technology may not be to that level. Still, there's some great concern. All right, looking at the circumstances in Korea, I'm wondering, has anyone in the United Kingdom or possibly Europe stepped forward to say would like to assist in some fashion? And this is not an indictment. I'm just curious how interested they've been to offer any kind of outreach for communication purposes, maybe with China, but possibly even with North Korea, although I don't know anyone who's
I haven't heard of any.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if you're aware, but there is a small British detachment there left over from the Korean War. Britain did contribute heavily to, they had quite a big force in Korea during the war. I think it was 100,000 men or something. But it's now just a token force of about 50. Right. But they haven't said anything about it.
Well, let me move on. I want to move on to a few other items before we go to the next break, and related to President Trump. And President Trump, we're going to get to Afghanistan and his experiences there, and also Pakistan. I'm curious, the events of the past 2 weeks with the they call it the mother of all bombs, but it's standing that MOAB stands for has another acronym. military ordnance altitude bomb, something of that nature. The question I have is, has there been additional fallout because of the actions in Afghanistan? And I saw with interest that Afghanistan, the ISIS or ISIL, but ISIS and Al-Qaeda apparently are getting friendly in Afghanistan. Is there some concern Afghanistan may be heating up?
I don't think so. If we just looking at Trump, and you've got three events which have happened in the last few weeks. One is the bombing in Syria in response to the chemical weapons attack. The second is the attack on the ISIS tunnels in Afghanistan. And the third is the decision to send a, quote, armada, end quote, and a vice president to Korea. And a lot of people are saying, well done, something's happening. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, at the back of their heads, a lot of other people are saying, whoa, wait a minute, we're just indulging in one act of brinkmanship after another. As long as the brinkmanship works, then Trump is a hero. If it fails at any one of these hurdles, then he's number one villain.
How is he being perceived right now as a result of those events? Syria, and of course, and by the way, it's massive ordnance aerial bomb, Moab. Yeah.
He's being perceived or received or thought of with wariness. They are concerned. As I said, in one respect, they're saying, well done. Something's being done and something needs to be done. But we're a bit concerned at the way you're doing it in diplomatic terms and everything else, that you may just go a little bit too far. And at the moment, it's a well done, but they're really worried that it will quickly reverse into a, oh my God, you complete idiot, you're destroying the world.
Here's the quick question. And, we've talked with you in the past about this, a little frustration here in the States, recognizing, and you've said often that the U.S. is the superpower. Where is the, if you will, the support or the guidance or interest on the part of European leaders? We've only got about a minute and a half, so can you address that very quickly? There's frustration here in the States that it's the old adage, you break it, you own it. But where is...
I don't think there's a lot of it's reported, but there's an awful lot of aid which comes out of the European Union and comes out of the UK, much more in percentage terms than comes out of the United States. They don't send a lot out in the form of military because they don't have the huge military options that the United States does. They do send some out. I mean, France is very active in Africa. We have Britain, France, Australia. They all have planes flying out of Syria. And Germany is very active. It takes the diplomatic lead in dealings with Russia. So I don't think it's fair to say they don't do anything, that they don't step up to the plate. I don't think it gets reported enough, and it is not as dramatic. We're not dropping Moabs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We don't have Moabs to drop. We don't have armadas to send to Korea.
No, you've shared with us.
Europe can't do that.
Well, you've shared with us. You've answered my question. Thank you very much for doing that. By the way, you are listening to Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com and Look Ahead Radio. Stay with us. Returning right back I want to come back to an issue associated with Afghanistan here on Viewpoints Around the World.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms from LookAheadNews.com. British Prime Minister Theresa May repeatedly and unequivocally refused to call a general election. Then she wandered off on a walking holiday and returned marching in the exact opposite direction. There will be, she announced, a British general election on June the 8th, and the issue will be Brexit, Brexit and Brexit. Why the U-turn? And what impact will it have on the British political scene and negotiations with the EU? Mrs. May is a politician. She has good reason to believe that she will win a snap election. Opinion polls put her Conservatives 20 points ahead of the opposition Labour Party. One of the reasons for their success is the no-nonsense firm leadership of Mrs. May compared to the lacklustre efforts of Jeremy Corbyn. At the same time, the threat from the far-right UK Independence Party is fast receding as Mrs. May has out-Brexited the Brexit Party of pre-referendum Britain. The biggest threat now comes from the centre-left Lib Dems. They've carved out a niche as the only pro-EU party. They offer the only home for the 48% who voted to remain in the European Union. They've been taking on new members at a mind-boggling rate, winning local by-elections, performing well in parliamentary by-elections, and actually winning one with a substantial majority. But they're starting from a low base. However, Mrs. May has only a 12-seat majority. The Lib Dems may be a long way from government, but they're only 7 seats from bringing down the government, possibly in the middle of negotiations with Brussels. Finally, there's the more noble reason given by Mrs. May. She wants to strengthen her mandate in order to secure the best possible deal in the upcoming divorce negotiations with EU hagglers. Mrs. May will almost certainly win with an increased majority. The bookies are giving her 10-to-1 odds, but the repercussions may not be entirely to her liking. For a start, the problems of Northern Ireland and Scotland will increase. A recent election in Northern Ireland put Sinn Féin within spitting distance of an absolute majority. Emboldened by their success, Republican Sinn Féin have started calling for a referendum on unification with ERA, a move which would almost certainly bring Protestant gunmen back onto the streets of Belfast. In both Northern Ireland and Scotland, Brexit is the catalytical secondary issue which has rejuvenated interest in the first, breaking with England. The election may also see the death of the Labour Party, which has dominated the British left for a century. Jeremy Corbyn's policies are nearly 40 years out of date, and his failure, or perhaps refusal, to stand up to the government over Europe has destroyed his personal standing with the electorate. The political pundits are predicting that the Lib Dems will emerge the big long-term winners from the June poll. They're unlikely to have as many seats as Labour now, but their tough, no-nonsense anti-Brexit stand will make them a tougher nut. Mrs. May claims she wants a parliament wholly behind her on Brexit. She won't get that with more Lib Dems in the House of Commons. Mrs. May wants a stronger domestic base for her talks with EU officials. She is Prime Minister by virtue of a palace coup rather than the vote of the people, a fact which several European leaders have been quick to point out. How will a direct electoral mandate affect her negotiating position? Will she become more likely to compromise, or will she take a tougher line? Both schools of thought are in the ascendant at the moment. Many think that she's been forced to take her current hard Brexit position because of a strong and vociferous anti-EU lobby from her own conservative backbenchers. With an electoral mandate, she can sideline them. The other school argues that Mrs. May needs the mandate to strengthen her current hardline position. A flexible Mrs. May or a tougher one? Either course has an impact on the future stability of Europe.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints around the world with Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com and Look Ahead Radio. Tom, we've got about 5 minutes. I want to go to one other issue very quickly related to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Afghanistan and the Trump administration have warned Pakistan about their assistance, very temperate assistance to Al-Qaeda. And of course, I mentioned earlier, Al-Qaeda and ISIS apparently are getting friendly here. my question to you related to Pakistan, Afghanistan, and of course we can throw in India in the process. Is this a new theater of concern, and is Europe paying attention? Are European leaders equally concerned? Because the experience we've had with Afghanistan now going back since 1990 with the invasion by Russia. What's the feeling there in Europe?
Well, the British are certainly concerned. I mean, they have historic connections there, which the United States uses quite a bit. Although it's developed a lot of its own intelligence, the British are quite good at supplying information from that part of the world. You have to remember that there's several reasons for the connection between Afghanistan and Pakistan. One is, of course, religious. Pakistan is, the reason for its being is the Islamic religion. Mm-hmm. It was created out of the old Indian subcontinent, the British Raj, as a Muslim state. It is the only country in the world which was created as a Muslim state, and that is its reason for its existence. The other reason is tribal. The tribal connections in that part of the world are much stronger than the national connections. And the tribe concerned is called the Pashtuns. And the boundaries for that tribe extend across the frontier and incorporate a big chunk of Pakistan and a big chunk of Afghanistan. And so there are very strong tribal and family ties between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Very interesting. So this is something to watch in the near term then?
Oh, near term, medium term, long term.
Very interesting. All right.
It's gonna be a perpetual problem. These sort of problems just don't go away. No. They're sort of papered over. But they're always there.
And unfortunately, in this day and age, something that would have been a distant event, quite frankly, can be easily transmitted and become a local event as well because of course, transportation and other concerns as well. All right, let's wrap it up with you, Tom. Tom Arms, again, of Look Ahead Radio and LookAheadNews.com, and remind you about LookAheadNews.com, tomorrow's news today, and you can sign up free by just going online. Go to LookAheadNews.com. Tom, let's talk about the Queen's birthdays. She has a double birthday, I see.
She has a double birthday. She has her birthday, which is on the 21st of April. It's coming up 2 days, when she will be 91 years old. Wow. But she's unique in that she also has an official birthday. And that's when they set off all the cannon and Hyde Park and everything else. And that's on the first Saturday in June. So she has two birthdays.
Now, with the
I don't know if she gets presents on both. I think she does.
Well, the other question, why the 1st of June?
I don't know, to be honest. You have to give me advance notice of these things sometimes. I don't know. I know why the 21st of April she was born on that day, but it may be that has always been the official birthday of the British monarch. That would be my guess.
I think it's a great. I love your honesty about not knowing. I question if many, and that's true of so many events that happen here around the world. I mean, they become inculcated, I like to use that term, in the calendar, and we just go with it. We don't really worry about why. All right. April 21st is the Queen's birthday, and of course, you said she'll be 91. She is showing no interest in giving up the crown, is she?
No. She's wedded to the concept of service.
Wonderful.
And, you don't see this often. She sees it as being vitally important that she sets an example, not just for the people in Britain, but people in the Commonwealth and beyond.
Well, the other aspect,
and as part of that example is that she works till she drops.
Well, the other aspect of this is she has a son who's waiting patiently. What is the circumstances there upon her departure from the throne?
Well, Charles would take over.
Okay.
And he's quite happy to wait. Okay. He supports her. He's never made any noise about wanting her to abdicate so that he can move up a notch.
Interesting. All right. So the 21st is her official birthday, and that's just a few days off. What is expected? Any major?
No, 21st is her natural birthday.
And but would there be any major events happening for her natural birthday?
Oh, there'll probably be a few parties and things like that. When she turned 90, they had a big street parties here in the UK, and so everyone got together and had closed down the street and pulled out cakes and had games and everything else. And there was a huge street party in the Mall, which is a big road which runs up to Buckingham Palace, where they had something like 20,000 people, whom the Queen entertained to a picnic lunch.
Interesting. All right. Of course, that was her 90th birthday. You've been listening to, of course, Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of LookAheadNews.com and Look Ahead Radio. Tom, thank you for being with us this evening.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.